wealth is produced for the sugar planters. Sugar is king. For nearly 2 centuries, Jamaica is wrapped in the iron chains of slavery. But every now and then, men break out in search of freedom. There are 29 organized slave rebellions and countless individual escapes. Only a few really find freedom, but they leave a legacy of courage. Finally, emancipation. On August 1st, 1838, full freedom comes to Jamaica. The chains are broken forever. After emancipation in 1838, the exodus begins. In large and small groups, thousands of ex-slaves move away from the estates. They go to build new communities in the hills where they can develop their own way of life and learn the meaning of freedom.
I'm going with my woman to the hills to find a piece of ground and build a home. As long as I can cultivate my land, no man can fool with me or force my hand. I'll work in Bush's cane field if I must, but God believe me, only if I must. Barefoot I stand as tall as any man. I'm free now, I'm free now.
They work and they build. And among the first places that they raise, others will grow. Most of them become Baptists, the faith that had fought long and Jamaica prosper, and they feed the island with their diverse crops. The horn of of plenty pours out its fruits upon the earth. But a time of trouble is approaching. The sugar industry begins to collapse. Plantation after plantation is forced out of business because of stiff competition, poor management, outmoded agricultural practices, high production costs, labor problems. Fields are thrown up, houses fall into decay, families disappear. Jobs are scarce, money is even scarcer. It is hard for everyone, planter and laborer alike. And as the sugar industry collapses, everything else begins to decay. But there is more to come. In the 1850s, cholera and smallpox kill about 50,000 people, mostly in the towns. In the 1860s, prices rise high on imported goods because of the American Civil War. In 1862, Edward John Eyre is appointed to govern Jamaica. He has no understanding of the country, no sympathy for its people. Drought grips the land. The earth dries and hardens. Crops strangle and die. The country is divided. The ways of slavery die hard. The ex-masters cannot accept the ex-slaves as fellow citizens, seek to keep them forever as a class of laborers and servants. Taxes are heavy. Quarrels about ownership of land and trespass are frequent. But perhaps the worst thing of all in all this troubled time is the denial of justice. It is almost impossible for laborers to get justice in the petty sessions courts when they are defrauded of their wages. For the magistrates are generally managers of estates. People are arrested and thrown in jail for the most trivial things. The law has been turned into a weapon to club the people into submission. But nowhere in Jamaica are things as bad as they are in the parish of St. Thomas in the east. St. Thomas is ruled by its iron-fisted Custos, Baron Maximilian Augustus von Kettelholt. Under the rule of this German aristocrat, the magistrates of St. Thomas have become the worst in the island, and hope begins to perish in the hearts of the people. In this time of great trouble, an angry voice rises. It belongs to George William Gordon, son of a Scottish planter and a slave woman. Born a slave, Gordon has worked his way up to become a rich man and a great landowner. Fierce, extremely religious, eccentric in many of his habits, he is always fighting for the rights of the poor and the despised. At the time, Gordon is not a member of the legislature, but as a prominent magistrate, he quickly comes into conflict with Governor Edward John Eyre. One day, as a member of the St. Thomas Vestry or Parochial Board, Gordon inspects the prison in Morant Bay.
What is this man doing here?
There was nowhere else to put him, sir.
But this is a latrine, sir. The man is obviously very sick. sick, sir. He's dying, sir.
Is this true?
Yes, sir.
But this is even worse than I thought. Why was he put in jail?
Well, he really didn't do anything, sir.
Not done anything. My good man, what do you mean?
Well, you see, sir, this man went to the rector, the Reverend Cook, for some alms because he was sick and hungry. So was told there was none coming, so was sent here.
Sent to prison? To be cared for a sick and starving man?
Well,
I've never heard of anything like this before in my life.
It's not really my fault, sir.
No, but somebody's going to answer for it. You can depend on it. I'm going to protest this gross irregularity to the governor and demand an immediate inquiry.
Result of the investigations by the board in charge of the Morant Bay prison which you ordered have come.
Yes, you mean this thing concerning the complaint by Mr. Gordon about some man in the latrine?
Yes, sir.
Yes, very well. What's the long and short of it?
It appears that Mr. Gordon's complaints were fair and accurate, sir.
What?
Yes, sir. It was, as Mr. Gordon said.
Well, I'm afraid I don't regard that as the most important thing.
I beg your pardon, sir.
The important thing is that I believe Mr. Gordon was trying to bring the rector of St. Thomas into disrepute by this complaint. It was a deliberate piece of malice and a calculated insult to the rector, the Reverend Cook. He is an upright gentleman of unimpeachable character.
But, Excellency, the facts are correct.
I say that's not important, sir. I want Gordon removed from his post of vestryman and justice of the peace in St. Thomas in the East for his disgraceful attempt to disgrace the rector of that parish.
Gordon is removed from his post as Justice of the Peace and Vestryman in spite of an appeal to the colonial office. But in the next election in 1863, he runs for a seat in St. Thomas. Among Gordon's supporters in this election is one of the most powerful figures to emerge from the pages of Jamaica's history, the Baptist deacon, Paul Bogle of Stony Gut. A prosperous small settler and one of the few people in St. Thomas who can vote, Bogle is not awed by wealth or privilege. In him, the people of St. Thomas find a man who has sprung from the same grass roots as themselves, but who is greater in spirit than any of them. They begin to look to him for leadership. Gordon wins the election and takes his seat in the House of Assembly in Spanish Town for the second time. He was first elected in 1844 as a member for St. Thomas in the Vale. This time he enters the House primarily to fight against Governor Edward John Eyre, the man who, consciously or unconsciously, has become the champion of the forces of corruption and oppression. Shortly after he is elected, Gordon is made church warden in the vestry of St. Thomas, and once more finds himself among his old enemies, the Custos of St. Thomas, Baron von Kettleholt, Reverend Cook, the rector, and his son, the clerk of courts.
Thanks, Baron.
Thank you, sir.
Well, Baron, our good friend Gordon is back in the vestry again. Yes. And the church warden, too.
Yes. How can we ever put up with that man again?
The governor is furious. Don't worry. Gordon won't have a seat for long.
Oh, is there a way of getting rid of him?
Let me ask you both a question. What religion does Gordon belong to? I believe he was an Anglican once.
I'm a Presbyterian, too, I think.
There's no knowing with that madman. But now I believe he's a Baptist.
I'm an independent Baptist, too.
As far as I'm concerned, he is a Baptist. And on that ground, I'm not going to allow him to take a seat in the vestry. But how can you prevent him? He's been elected. But as what?
As church warden, of course.
Precisely. But how can Gordon take the church warden's seat in the vestry of St. Thomas? He is a Baptist. And as such, he cannot speak on behalf of the Church of England, which is the established church in this country. Well, Baron, I must say that's a very smart piece of thinking.
Yes, indeed.
My dear Cook, just remember that we are running this parish. And at the next meeting of the vestry, I shall deal with Mr. George William Gordon. Your health, sir. Mr. Gordon, I once more ask you to leave this room. You're not qualified to sit in this vestry.
And Mr. Custis Kettlehold, I once more refuse.
Very well. You leave me no alternative. Remove him!
But nothing stops Gordon. In the House of Assembly, he begins to attack the governor in earnest.
The governor, as you know, has refused to do anything to relieve unemployment or to reduce the unfair taxation that is breaking the back of the poor peasants of Jamaica. Instead, gentlemen, he has jammed through a bill to provide flogging as a penalty for predial larceny, and another bill to establish the treasure for certain offenders. I tell you, gentlemen, I have never seen a creature more voracious for cruelty and power than the present governor of Jamaica. If we are to be governed by such a governor much longer, then the people will have to fly to arms and demand self-government.
It is now 1865, and there is a deep depression on the land. Dr. Edward Underhill of the Baptist Missionary Society writes to the Secretary of State for the Colonies, pleading for help for the people of Jamaica. On Governor Eyre's advice, his letter is ridiculed. Protest meetings are held all over the island. Some small settlers write to the Queen asking permission to rent Crown land to plant food. The Secretary of State replies, advising the people to work on the sugar estates whenever their labor is wanted and not to look for help from any other source. The people of Jamaica are hurt and bewildered by this thoughtless reply.
Yes, sir. Yeah, but that's all.
My friends, the Queen is too noble-hearted to say anything unkind to even her most humble subjects. It is my belief, therefore, that her ministers have been deceived and misled. The consequence is a serious grievance to our people. But my advice to you is to be prudent but firm in your remonstrances, and I have no doubt that truth will ultimately prevail. Right?
An appeal said to have been written by George William Gordon goes out to the people of St. Thomas and St. Anne, inviting them to a big public meeting to be held in Morant Bay on August 12th, 1865.
People of St. Anne's, you have no sugar estates to work on, nor can find other employment. We call on you to come forth. Even if you be naked, come forth and protest against the unjust representations made against you by Mr. Governor Eyre and his band of custodies. People of St. Thomas in the East, you have been ground down too long already. Shake off your sloth. They have dared you to defend your rights against the enormities of an unscrupulous and oppressive foreigner, Mr. Custis Kettlehold. He seemed to think that that letter from the Secretary of State should quiet you, but how can men with a sense of wrong in their bosoms be content to be quiet with such a reproachful letter as this? Remember that he only is free whom the truth makes free. You are no longer slaves, but free men.
At the public meeting, Paul Bogle is selected to lead a deputation to Spanish Town to see the governor.
I am happy to hear that you've selected Deacon Paul Bogle to lead the deputation into Spanish Town. I know that he's the man who has your interests very much at heart and will sacrifice himself for your advancement. I heartily endorse this selection. Well, Paul, I want to wish you the best of luck, and I hope you succeed in your enterprise. Remember, a great deal depends on this.
Thank you. I'll try my best.
Paul Bogle has become almost a king to the laborers and small settlers in the south-central part of St. Thomas. And associated with him in the adventures to come is his brother, Moses, a tough, dedicated man. In Paul Bogle, the people have at last found a personal leader with the courage to resist tyranny and injustice, And as he departs on his journey to Spanish Town, it is almost as if he shoulders the burden of their hopes and their future welfare. But it is not only the hopes and grievances of his friends, neighbors, and followers that Paul Bogle carries with him. He carries a burden for all the settlers and peasants and laborers of Jamaica, for all those who cannot or dare not speak for themselves or fight for their rights. This is the most fateful deputation in the history of Jamaica. It is 45 rough and weary miles from Stony Gut to Spanish Town, and they walk all the way. There is this last great hope that if they can get to see the governor and speak to him face to face, all may yet be well.
Oh, Bogle led a strong deputation to tell Governor Eyre of the condition. From Stony Gut to Spanish Town they went, and on this mission only they were bent. There was hope in the whole deputation that Bogle present the situation. So wicked men with evil plans would fail, and justice, truth, and mercy would prevail. Was a long road to their destination, cross water down mountainside plantation. The rivers were deep and the sun was hot, but not one of them thought of turning back. Through the sleeping towns they marched late at night, hoping Governor Eyre would do what was right. 45 miles and cane fields they did pass, o'er the tall bridge to Spanish Town at last.
Spanish Town at last, the capital of Jamaica, the seat of government, the center and hub of authority. Into this realm of privilege walk these tired, excited countrymen who come from a remote hill district with a crude, outlandish name that is soon to be written in fire in the history book of Jamaica. But the long walk is in vain. Governor Eyre will not see them. The harsh truth sinks in. The last hope fades from their eyes. On the weary road home, the shame of failure turns to despair and then to anger. By the time Paul Bogle reaches Stony Gut, his anger has hardened to grim resolve. The failure of the deputation is a death blow to the hopes of the people of St. Thomas, and it hurls Paul Bogle into the forefront of the struggle.
I have failed you. But it is not because I and the men who went with me did not try our best. It is because all doors of peaceful appeal have been closed against us. That is why the letters and appeals and speeches have failed. That is why the deputation has failed. And now, my friends, there is nothing left for us to do but to put our shoulders to the wheel.
While George William Gordon collects money to send a deputation to England to see the Queen, Paul Bogle drills men. In his own mind, it is now a struggle between himself and the authorities of St. Thomas. The people themselves have turned their backs on the authorities. They established their own courts, magistrates and constables, as if trying to create a society of their own in which the authority will derive from themselves, in which they can find justice and self-respect. In the midst of this society, they place Paul Bogle. He is their priest, their judge, and their chief. Early in October, in the midst of this activity, comes word that two men, Lewis Miller and Alexander White, who belong to the area, are to be tried in the courthouse at Morant Bay. Having lost faith in the ability of the magistrates to hand down just decisions, Bogle and some of his followers decide to go to the trial to make sure that justice is done. Saturday, October 7th, the day of the trial. Paul Bogle and other men from Stony Gut gather about the Morant Bay courthouse. The trial of Alexander White is in progress.
Alexander White, I find you guilty of assault. You will pay a fine of 4 shillings and the cost.
What's the cost, sir?
12 and 6pence.
No! I believe it's on your dad and charge him. And he's on the right to pay no cost. Do not interfere. You must not make a noise. And the money you get is too much. You're a little too officious. You're not a public officer. You better get out.
Silence!
Fight up one. We will see.
Don't let that fellow go! Take him into custody!
The troublemaker, James Joygahan by name, escapes. This is the first of a series of violent acts by which Bogle and his followers show their contempt for a society for which they have lost respect. As a result of the disturbance at the courthouse, a warrant is issued for the arrest of 28 persons, including Paul Bogle. On Tuesday, October 10th, the constables set out for Stony Gut with the warrant. They are nervous, and they have been warned several times to turn back. Nearing Stony Gut, they get a different kind of warning.
Is him that down there?
Yes, that is the Paul Bogle.
All right, come on, get him then, now. Come on, fellas.
The policemen tell Paul Bogle that they have a warrant for his arrest. He tells them that he is not going with them, and they try to arrest him.
Hey, Grant! It's too late for me and my men to go down to Morant Bay today. But you can expect us tomorrow.
That same Tuesday, when the Custos, Baron von Kettleholt, is told of the incident, he orders the volunteers to assemble the next day at the courthouse and writes to Governor Eyre for troops.
The force at my disposal is insufficient to uphold the law. And if the people carry out their threats, the worst consequences must be anticipated.
That night, Paul Bogle also sits down to write. Tomorrow he is to start his march on Morant Bay as he promised. But this letter is a last gesture on the side of law and peace. A last forlorn cry for help.
We call upon your excellency for protection, seeing we are Her Majesty's loyal subjects, which protection, if refused, we will be compelled to put our shoulders to the wheel, as we have been imposed upon for a period of 27 years, with due obeisance to the laws of our Queen and country, and we can no longer endure the same.
The next day, Wednesday, October 11th at 8 in the morning, Governor Eyre in Spanish Town receives the Baron's letter. Before going to Flamstead for a dinner party, he sends off dispatches ordering 100 men to be put aboard a warship and sent to Morant Bay.